People who cry easily aren't weak. They simply experience the world differently. There are brains that don't experience the world more intensely. They simply experience it more deeply. If that were true, then perhaps,
It's okay,
for all these
Andy.
years,
Don't
we've
listen to
misunderstood people who
I
cry
wish I could
easily.
tell you
We call them
everything
weak,
will be okay.
too sensitive, too fragile. But what if
Look at him
those
go.
tears
Isn't
were
he
never a sign of
amazing?
weakness? What if they were simply the way a different kind of brain responds to the world?
Điều đó có
What
thật
then?
không?
There was once a boy named Andy. From a very young age,
Stop
Andy
that
always
right
felt
now, young
different from the
man.
other children. One afternoon
I'm
after
sorry.
school, his teacher told the class a story
doesn't
about an old
understand.
dog waiting
The flow
faithfully
continues,
outside a
just
train
like
station
life
for its
always
owner.
moves
The
forward.
story ended. The school bell rang. The children rushed outside to play. Only a few minutes later,
You don't have
no
to
one
keep
mentioned the dog
pretending
again.
to be happy.
But Andy was different. The entire walk home, one
Look at what
question
you've
stayed
left
in his mind.
behind.
What if the
Don't
owner
worry,
never
little
comes
guy.
back?
We made
He
it.
imagined the dog lying
But-
there, day after day, under the
What
blazing
about?
sun,
It's
through
okay.
the pouring
I'm
rain,
here now.
still looking in the same direction, still waiting. That night, Andy quietly burst into tears. No one understood why. Not even Andy knew how to explain it. How could he possibly tell anyone that he was crying over a dog that had never even existed? It wasn't the only time. A wounded bird beside the road, a dry leaf caught on a fence, an elderly man eating dinner alone in a small restaurant, an old melody playing unexpectedly on the radio. The things other people barely noticed stayed with Andy for a very long time, far longer than he wished they would. Then one day, Andy tripped in the schoolyard. His knee was bleeding. Before he even had a chance to stand up, the tears were already
Wow.
falling. Some classmates laughed. Someone whispered, "What kind of boy cries that easily?"
remember all
His
of
teacher
this.
walked over, brushed the dirt from his clothes, and smiled.
No
"Don't cry.
way.
Be
Is that
strong."
it?
Andy
Is that
nodded.
it?
He wiped away his tears.
Wow.
But from that day on, Andy learned something. Not how to
Where did this
understand
come
his
from?
emotions, but how to hide them.
Hmm.
Whenever he
A
wanted to cry,
drawing.
he turned his face away. Whenever his throat tightened, he forced himself to swallow
I
it
understand
down.
what you're
Whenever
going
his heart
through,
hurt too
and
much
I
to put
feel
into
it too.
words, he smiled instead. Little by little, Andy became incredibly good at pretending he was fine. So good that eventually, he believed it
You
himself.
didn't deserve that.
Years passed.
Look.
Andy grew up. He found a job, made friends, built a
Look at the
life that looked
baby.
perfectly ordinary. But there were
You
still
make me
strange
so
moments.
proud,
One
Andy.
evening on a subway train, a little girl accidentally dropped her
I
teddy
want to be
bear
like
onto the
you.
platform. The doors closed. The train pulled away. The little girl burst into tears in her father's arms. Only a few seconds passed. Then life moved on. People looked back at their phones, put on their headphones, read the news, continued with their lives. Only Andy kept staring
I
back
wish
at the
I could
platform
fix
long
this.
after it had disappeared.
Just be with him.
That night, as he got ready for
Just be
bed,
with him.
the little girl was still on his mind. Will her
And
father
that's
buy her
why,
another
when
teddy
you
bear?
break it down,
Or will she
it's
hug an
really
empty
just
bed
about
tonight,
understanding
wishing it were
how
still
your
there?
thoughts
Andy
connect
didn't know,
with your
but he
feelings.
couldn't stop thinking about it. For the first time in his life, Andy became afraid of his own emotions. Why am I like this? Why can everyone else let things go so easily, while I can't? That question stayed with him for years, until one rainy afternoon. Andy happened to read a psychology
You're
study.
just in
It
time.
contained only
Take
a
a
single
walk with me,
sentence,
Al.
but it made his entire world slow down. There are brains that don't
Okay.
experience the world more intensely. They simply experience it more deeply. Andy read it again, once, then again. For the first time, he didn't ask, "What's wrong with me?" Instead, he asked a completely different question. What if there was never anything wrong with me at all?
Listen
Andy looked
closely
out
to
the
this.
rain-covered window.
It's a tale of
Raindrops
courage
struck
and
the
discovery,
pavement, then
one that you'll
disappeared,
never forget.
just like the countless
Believe
emotions
me.
he had spent years
Huh?
trying to bury. But this time, Andy didn't look away. He simply watched them
Wait.
and quietly smiled.
Are
Because
you
perhaps
okay?
this wasn't the end of his tears. Perhaps it was the beginning of the truth. Maybe people who cry easily were never weak. Maybe
Hi,
they've simply
I saw
been
you were sitting alone.
experiencing the world in a way that most of us have never learned to
Hello.
see. Andy kept reading, and this time,
Here, I found
the
your
answer left
toy.
him
Are
speechless.
you okay?
The brains of highly sensitive
My
people
clown. Thank
rarely
you.
ever get a chance
You're
to truly
welcome.
rest.
Now you can play
While
again.
most people simply hear words,
Balance reason
they also
and
listen to the
emotion.
silence between them.
They're both
While others
necessary.
notice only a smile, they notice the eyes behind
Yes,
it,
they are.
the slightest furrow of a brow, a quiet sigh, a pause
The
that
truth
lasts
is,
only a few seconds.
all the
To most
answers were
people,
inside
these
me
are passing
all along.
details. But to them,
Look, she
they tell an
made it.
entire story. Suddenly, Andy remembered everything. The countless days he came home
I
exhausted,
told you she would.
even though he had done nothing physically demanding. The crowded gatherings that left his mind completely drained. The sleepless nights, spent thinking about the sadness he had glimpsed in a stranger's eyes. For so many years, Andy had believed that something was wrong with him. But now, for the very first time, he began to see things differently. Maybe he had never been weak.
Okay there, sir?
Maybe he had simply been feeling too much. Andy gently closed the book. Outside the window, the rain had stopped. A final ray of evening sunlight quietly broke through the gray clouds. He stood there for a long time. For the first time in his life, Andy no longer felt ashamed of his tears, but he realized something else. Perhaps
You're right.
what makes people like him suffer isn't that they feel too deeply. It's that no one ever taught them how to live with those emotions. Andy smiled softly. It wasn't the smile of someone who had found every answer. It was the smile of someone who had finally stopped blaming himself. For the first time, he no longer asked, "What's wrong with me?" Instead, he began asking a completely different question. How can I live as the person I truly am?
Wow.
Perhaps that was the
Look at
question
that,
Andy should have
Andy.
asked many years
It's
ago.
beautiful.
And perhaps it would become the
Magical.
question that changed the rest of his
Almost
life.
there.
Because maybe the greatest danger isn't being too sensitive.
We're
It's
getting
spending an
closer.
entire lifetime trying to become someone you were never meant to be.
Hooray then, Gregson.
Come with me. The journey continues. Come on, buddy. Let's go. We've got this.